the way I sort of think about constructing stories and write stories that I can think about in the same way I would like the cadence of a drum pattern or the way I'm supporting a song rhythmically. There's a very supportive structure to that I can bring, I can bring one to the other. And I never really thought about that before. And it makes a whole lot of sense, actually.
Welcome to the Musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
I'm John Timpane.
On this podcast, we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, jobs, hobbies, and passions.
Difference makers who really make a difference. Today, the Musical Innertube is proud to welcome Patrick Berkery. We could have him on because he's a nationally published writer and blogger about sports, entertainment, music, baseball, and just about anything else that gets into his head. I, John, published and edited Patrick during my halcyon days at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Or we could have Patrick on as one of the hottest drummers in all of Pennsylvania. In fact, we'll try to wedge a little music talk in the second half of our show. But today we're having Patrick on as the editor of a newsletter called Keystone, a local news org focusing on things happening locally throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But first, we just have to ask Patrick about his brand new project titled Pizzavania. Hey, grab us a hot slice of that, Patrick. Tell us what Pizzavania about.
Well, Pizzavania is, in a very broad sense, it's a newsletter. Right now, it's twice monthly. And what I'm doing with Pizzavania is highlighting like the best pizzas in the state. I consider myself a pizza enthusiast. I don't want to say expert because I don't think you can ever truly understand everything there is to know about pizza because there's so many varieties and the lineage and all that. But yeah, what I really want to do with it is just highlight the best pizzas in the state and also the stories behind some of the pizzerias in the state. I think there's some fascinating stories behind some of these pizzerias. Just a little bit down the road, I'll be doing something on Down North, which is a great Detroit-style pizzeria in Philadelphia in the Strawberry Mansion neighborhood. They hire exclusively formerly incarcerated people. So there's a really great story behind that pizzeria. I'll be going out to the Subway Cafe in Harrisburg, which I believe has been there since 1948, serving up like little tavern bar pies. So there's the pizza capital of the world up in Old Forge, Pennsylvania, in Nipa. There's Philadelphia has amazing pizza, always has, and even more so, I would say, in the last 10 years. So there's just, I don't want this to be like a pizza review type of thing. I want this to really like sort of highlight all the great pizza there is in the state and the stories behind some of these pizzerias. And also, like, I welcome reader recommendations from people. And Pennsylvania is a very big state, so it varies region to region. There's something called Altoona pizza, which from what I understand is kind of like a Stouffer's French bread pizza with like American cheese on top. I'm not gonna,
Exotic.
let's just say I'll get there eventually. It's not a priority yet. But yeah, so that's essentially what we're doing with it. I get to expense pizza. So basically, my birthday wish blowing out the candles as a 13-year-old came true. I wished someday I hope someone will pay me to do a twice monthly newsletter about pizza. And by golly, 40-something years later, that dream has come true. That wish has come true.
Good things come to those who wait, right?
And like pizza.
Have you gotten any reader feedback yet about Pizzavania?
A lot of feedback, yeah. A lot of recommendations, people telling me, oh, I really enjoy this. Yeah, it's been all very positive feedback so far. Ideally, this reaches a really wide cross-section of both, aspiring pizzaiolas, real serious pizza types, and people who just, casually enjoy pizza. I mean, the reason I started this was part of our mission with the Keystone is that we try to appeal to people, attract people, speak to people who aren't necessarily like news carnivores. They aren't necessarily like keeping up with all that's going on politically. They may not know who their state senator, state rep is. So we're trying to appeal to those types of Pennsylvanians and trying to find different avenues of doing so. And I kept thinking of an idea. They kept asking me, you should really come up with an additional newsletter product in addition to the daily flagship newsletter that I do for the Keystone. And I wanted to do something that could appeal to a large cross-section of people, all kinds of people, regardless of who they vote for, or who they love, or who they pray to, or anything like that. And I always come back to my sort of way of thinking. kind of the last two things that gets everybody under the tent are sports and food.
Right.
And if you want to drill down on that even more, I think pizza is like one of the last foods that like who doesn't like pizza, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and if they don't, I have to question some things. So I just thought, maybe there's a way in that I can do a newsletter about pizza and will appeal to a whole lot of people. It'll bring a whole lot of people in under the tent. It will potentially bring in new readers, new eyeballs to our harder, if you like, news content and more serious stories and content and things like that. So just thinking about this the other day, actually, I can't recall the last time I was this excited about something professionally, in terms of writing an editorial in that world. So yeah, very excited about it. I see a lot of possibilities for it. I've got the next few months kind of mapped out in terms of what I want to do with it and where I want to take it. So, fingers crossed, this time next year, it's a huge success.
Well, I can see, pizza personalities, stories of pizza from long ago. I could just see all sorts of wrinkles.
A lot of possibilities, I think.
Let's step back for just a moment. And I just think it's so wonderful that we started with Pizzavania because we've heard a little bit now about audience and the kinds of people that Keystone is interested in. Can you give us a thumbnail sketch of Keystone as a whole?
Yeah, well, in the thumbnail sketch, I can give you that we it's not, you and I come from, we know each other from our Philadelphia Inquirer days back when there was lots of ads and busy newsrooms and all that kind of stuff. This is a much smaller scale operation that endeavors to cover the entire state of Pennsylvania. We have a political reporter based in Harrisburg. We have a reporter based in Berks County who covers a lot of education and health issues. We have some other freelancers throughout the state who cover a variety of topics. I'm based just outside of Philadelphia, and I do a fair amount of editing and writing about different topics, and I do our daily flagship newsletter. And so we cover kind of, what I like to say is we cover news that Pennsylvanians can use. Whether it's legislation being proposed in Harrisburg and how that impacts communities throughout the state, whether or not it's things going on with healthcare legislation, how that's impacting people throughout the state, how what's happening in Washington kind of trickles down to Harrisburg and then to local communities. So it's really kind of showing people, I guess one way to put it would be like the power of policy and political action at the state level.
Mm-hmm.
So many people, when they think of politics and government, they think everything that happens in Washington impacts their lives, when in fact, most of what impacts the day-to-day lives of Pennsylvanians happens in Harrisburg. And it happens at their town councils. It happens on their school boards. It happens on a much more local granular level.
Small.
Yeah. Part of what we do is kind of educating people to that and letting people know, like, here's what's happening in Harrisburg. Here are the laws that are being proposed. Here are the laws that have been passed. Here's the potential impact on your community. Our reporter who is based in Harrisburg, Sean Kitchen, also has a newsletter product called the Keystone Labor Report, where he covers a lot of labor issues in Pennsylvania. Penn State professors, educators are trying to form one of the biggest unions in the history of the state. There's just a lot of things to cover in the state. And we try to do the best job we can with the staff that we have.
In looking at the Keystone, which I've been doing for a while now, I keep going back to the 2010s or the late aughts at the newsroom, at the Inquirer, and we were talking about where newspapers should go because we saw the handwriting on the wall and we knew that we had to go somewhere and do something. And what you've just described is what we used to call a news org, which would be an online news venue, probably small, that nevertheless got to the stories that the big guys actually couldn't. Because we again and again experienced that at the newsroom. We wanted to cover things, let's say a pizza columnist, it's the kind of thing that big newspapers just can't drill down to quite as easily. It seems as though you guys are nimble. It seems as though you were where we were trying to get to all along. And in a day-to-day basis as the news editor, Is it as nerve-wracking as working for a traditional paper was? Is your normal day, is it as crazy as that? I'm wondering
No,
how your daily experience is.
no, and I can tell you what makes it less crazy, like, right off the bat, coming from, like, traditional news, because I also worked at in addition to freelancing at the Inquirer all those years, I ended up working at, like, Bucks County Courier-Times and their affiliated orgs. We're not like a traditional news organization in that we're not chasing breaking news. We're not chasing developing stories. We're focusing on specific stories, specific lanes of coverage. Occasionally, yes, stories do break that we need to jump on right away. So no, it's not nerve wracking in that sense. The thing, if you want to call it nerve wracking, is just we want to do a great job and we want to serve, because there are so many news deserts in Pennsylvania, and that's only going to grow with public broadcasting funding being yanked. I mean, look at Central Pennsylvania is a good example, because Penn State's public broadcasting arm served all these communities from top to bottom in Central Pennsylvania. I wouldn't say that it's nerve wracking, but we need to think constantly and rethink constantly about how we can serve these communities that are underserved, how we can tell stories about what's happening in rural Pennsylvania. Yes, Philly's big. Yes, Pittsburgh's big. And you've got, markets like Allentown and Scranton and that whole area. But there are so many pockets of the state that are underserved. Those stories need to be told. So if anything's nerve wracking, it's how do we serve everybody in Pennsylvania? It's a diverse state, diverse interests from end to end. We really want to do our best effort always to serve everyone. So that's probably the most nerve-wracking part about it. How do we do that?
Yes.
And how do we do it well? How do we keep people coming back? And how are we going to do it 5 years from now? Because what we're doing now is going to look drastically different in 5 years.
So they trust you on pizza, they'll probably trust you on some of the other stories as well.
And vice versa. So somebody could reading a story about broadband, lack of broadband in a certain part of Pennsylvania. And, oh, wow, there are also this cool newsletter about pizza. And, oh, they're covering labor issues. Oh, and they're covering education issues in a way that other news orgs aren't doing. There's a lot of facets to what we do. I would say everything does kind of feed off of each other in a way. We're also very active on social. I don't want to say like we're a social first news organization, but I hate using the cliche, but we're doing everything we can to meet people where they are. And I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but so many people get their news via social media these days. That's the first place. Sometimes that's the only place where they're getting their news. So we're leading with that. We have a website, we have a robust web presence, and we have newsletters, and we're branching off into a lot of different directions. And it's just within that, we're just trying to serve the entire state in a variety of ways, in a variety of areas.
So are you on TikTok?
We are, yes.
All right.
We're everywhere. YouTube.
That's how you're going to reach more people
Yeah.
than anywhere else is going on TikTok.
I mean, YouTube Shorts.
No,
I
that's
think,
good. Yeah, YouTube is so powerful. And talk about how you are manifest via a YouTube short, because I'd love our listeners to hear that.
Yeah, it's just basically in a number of ways, we present stories in a number of ways. There could be like an explainer video about it, that would be on like YouTube Shorts and TikTok and even Instagram. There could be graphic carousels that explain the story, on Facebook and Instagram. We're really not doing anything revolutionary with our content on social. We're just trying to deliver the news in a variety of ways to a variety of people, who again aren't necessarily news carnivores. We're trying to appeal to those folks, to those Pennsylvanians, with stories that impact their communities.
There's been a complaint practically as long as I've been alive, frankly, that the average person doesn't understand civics, doesn't understand how the government runs.
Yeah.
I worked for state government for a while, and one of the big stories in that is you can ask people, what do you think of the legislature? They're a bunch of bums.
Yeah.
We should throw them all out. Well, what about your guy, Senator Jim?
Yeah.
Oh, we love Senator Jim. We vote for him all the time.
Well, that's assuming
how do you get through that dichotomy there?
Well, that's assuming they know the person who's representing them in Harrisburg, which more often than not, people don't. I'll give you an example. In the fall of 22, we hosted an event with Governor Shapiro when he was running against Mastriano. We hosted an event in South Philly. So I sort of kicked it off with a little explanation about, who we are and what the Keystone's about and everything. And I asked people in the audience, I was like, how many of you know who your state legislator is, your state rep or your state senator? If there were 75 people in the audience, I would say like 15 of them raised their hand. And these are, you would figure pretty politically aware people if they're coming to just a campaign event. So yeah, I think that people aren't very aware of who's making decisions for them in Harrisburg and how it impacts their life and how important the work being done in Harrisburg is to their day-to-day lives. And part of what we do is try to educate people about that. So in a sense, we are, I guess, providing some sort of civics lesson with our coverage. I mean, I will tell you, I will readily admit, I've done, as you were giving my intro in the background, I've done so many things over the years in my writing and editorial jobs. I've never covered a state house before. I've never covered politics before, but this has been a crash course in learning a lot. I knew some, but I didn't know nearly what I know now when I started working here in 2021.
You don't want to see sausage or politics being made.
Yeah, sometimes that's true, I guess, isn't it?
15 out of 75, I kind of can understand it. And also it goes to the heart of something that I heard you talk about earlier, Patrick, about your assumptions, so to speak, about who your audience is. You're cutting the cake differently from the kind of newspaper that I used to work for. Because we said just everybody with a capital E, starting with an 8th grade reading level. And what you folks are saying is, well, but there are all these folks out there who we'd like to serve who don't get served. You've decided that you want to appeal, well, of course, to everybody. You'd love everybody in the world to read your stuff, but also that really there is something to be gained by having a readership of people who maybe didn't know they would be interested.
That's true. And again, that kind of goes back to the cliche meeting people where they are. They're on social media. They're not necessarily bookmarking 10 news sites and rolling through the Washington Post and the New York Times and Pittsburgh Post-Gazette daily. Those days are gone, really. Those types of news carnivores.
We're aging out.
Yeah. So you need to think in those terms. Like, how are you going to reach these people? How are you going to reach these folks? And this is how we're doing it. And newsletters play a big part in that. You're not dealing with the algorithms, social media. You're showing up in people's inboxes. They're asking you to come in their inbox. They're signing up. They're opting in. You're not bombarding them with something they don't necessarily want. So, but it's incumbent upon us to deliver, a very quality product that they want to keep clicking on it every day when it shows up in their inbox.
I'd love to hear you talk about writing the daily, here's what's inside, thing that lands in my inbox every morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's not rocket science, really. I'm relying on our coverage, what our reporters are providing. We have wire content from AP and Reuters, and that really helps sort of fill out the things that we can't get to. Again, we're not a huge newsroom. It's a very big state. It's generally, I always think in terms of okay, what is useful to readers? What's going to help them? For example, when people can apply for the LIHEAP program, the heating assistance program of the state, what is happening with certain laws, big things regarding the Affordable Care Act, smaller things regarding property tax rebates, things that are very helpful to people's lives. What's happening in their communities? What are lawmakers proposing in Harrisburg? What are lawmakers trying to get across the finish line in Harrisburg? We weren't following it day to day, but the impact of the state budget impasse for however long that lasted, 5 months, how that was holding up money for certain programs in the state. We really try to be thoughtful about what we're delivering to people, how it impacts them daily. There's also stories about cool things to do in the state, places you can travel to, sites to visit, things to eat, interesting people doing cool things in their communities, things you're not necessarily going to find all the time.
And that's the kind of thing that I like. In the mix every morning, there'll be stuff that's fun. Check this out kind of feeling to it.
Yep, for sure. Yeah.
Sort of an alternative to the doom scrolling that we've heard about for so long.
Yeah.
I have USA Today on my phone, and I go on that every day. And yeah, you can come away from scrolling through 3 or 4 things on USA Today and say, man, this whole world has gone to crap, and we have no hope. But you try to counter that slightly by going in there and saying there are good things happening.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to soften things up on purpose, but we're trying to, on some level, be an antidote to doom scrolling, but at the same time, giving people the news they need. The guiding principle is am I giving Pennsylvanians news they can use? That's my guiding principle every day. Would I read this if it showed up in my inbox? That's another one. Those are the two, I would say, the two basic guiding principles that I'm following every day.
Now, Patrick, you're not busy enough. We could tell that. You've got scads of free time. So I imagine that you're out there playing a lot of music. Do you want to talk about the music you're playing?
Well, sure. I mean, I've had this dual existence all my life where, like, I play drums and I went to school for journalism and communications writing and editing. So I've never made it my full-time job playing music, but I've been able to, like, tour and record with some people over the years. And I just recently finished playing some shows with Robin Hitchcock,
Ooh.
legendary singer-songwriter to me, been around forever. So we just did a few shows a couple weeks ago. I do some recording with people here and there. I do a variety show in New York about 6 times a year with Wesley Stace, who for years recorded under the name John Wesley Harding. And we do this variety show. I'm in the house band.
Good pals with Wesley. Absolutely.
It's beautiful. I had no idea. So we do that. I've done recording with the band The War on Drugs, who people seem to know. I've played on their records, toured and recorded with bands like Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah, and Strand of Oak. Yeah, just I've done, I'm really fortunate that over the years, really good people whose music I like and who I like as people have asked me to play with them. And that's still happening. So it's whenever I get the opportunity to do it, I jump at it. It's great. I'm really fortunate that those opportunities are available.
Now, I can ask both of you this question because you're both musicians and you're both journalists. How do the two dovetail? How does your music help your journalism, and how does your journalism help your music? Or does it?
I would say the music part, it makes, you were talking before earlier about situations that are stressful or hair raising or whatever. Kind of some of the things I've dealt with in music over the years will prepare you for pretty much any challenge you could think of that would come up in a newsroom or in a journalistic setting. Nothing really like intimidates me or frightens me really. I've stared down pretty nerve-wracking situations playing music, in a live setting, in a recording setting, whatever. And it sets you up for success in a lot of other areas in your life, I think. And I would say having music not be my full-time job ever makes me enjoy it a lot more. And because it's tough. I'm not telling you anything that people don't know at large. It's hard to make a living more than ever, now more than ever, playing music. And particularly to do that, you have to be on the road a lot because that's where the money is, and that's,
Yeah.
I've been on the road a fair amount in my life and I enjoy it. And I enjoy playing music, and it's kind of what you have to do to play music a lot, but it's not easy. It's not an easy existence.
No.
So where was I going with this? I think I enjoy music more because it's not my full-time job, and that whatever stresses I encounter on a daily basis, working for the Keystone or whatever other outlet I have worked for over the years, I know that, like, okay, this is really bothering me now, but in 3 hours or 3 days or 3 weeks, I'm going to be off doing this cool musical thing. So that's like something to look forward to, so it's really, I mean, everybody has hobbies,
Yeah.
and they enrich their life. This is mine, and it's just a cool thing I've been, like I said, had these great opportunities to do over the years. So they each kind of help each other really. And I think, and I never really realized this, I had the benefit of working with Carol Erickson, who was on CBS News in Philly for years and years and years. And we worked together closely at the Bucks County Courier-Times for a couple of years. And she really explained to me how the way I sort of think about constructing stories and write stories, that I can think about in the same way I would like the cadence of a drum pattern or the way I'm supporting a song rhythmically. There's a very supportive structure to that I can bring. I can bring one to the other.
Yes.
And I never really thought about that before. And it makes a whole lot of sense, actually. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question, I realize, but I hope it answered your question.
It's beautifully put. I think that live performance is one of my favorite things to do, partly because you have to think on your feet an awful lot. I mean, folks don't realize that, and I should think this is just as common for a man who plays the drums, such as yourself, and a man who plays either the bass or the flute, depending on what band he's in, that if you're in the middle of a solo, you're making split-second decisions all the time. And that is a talent. That is also a habit. It's really good for you in a lot of ways. It's a decision-making mindset, And I don't want to be that mechanical sounding about it, but I think every musician knows what I'm talking about.
And I'm for sure. And even like a studio setting, when the red light's on and somebody's paying for studio time, and like it's all, most recordings are built around the drums. To me, I think that's the foundation of any good song is the drums. And it's incumbent upon you to like build that foundation, and people are looking right at you. You're recording, the red light's on, you got to make it happen. And I don't want to say it's like a pressure situation, but it's like you got to deliver. And I think I'm pretty good at it. I've been doing it a lot of years, and people ask me to do it. I think I've gotten pretty good at that. And that just helps whatever deadline type stuff gets thrown at my way in a newsroom. I can like, all right, let me just sit down. Let me think about what needs to be done, and I can do it. I'm pretty methodical that way about the way I approach things, both musically and editorially.
Well, Patrick, this has been wonderful. Love to have you on again. When you get Pizzavania really up and running, we should get back and see how it's slicing, because I just love the idea of a newsletter on pizza.
Thanks. So do I. That's why I pitched it. And I'm so thankful for my bosses to saying yes to it. Thank you. And I hope to come back to discuss its success, its wild success a year from now, or 2 years down the road, or whatever the case is.
So Keystone journalist and great drummer. And I've heard you play, man.
Thank you.
I know what I'm talking about.
Thank you very much.
Patrick Berkery, thank you for coming to the Musical Innertube.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. I'll talk to you all soon.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Send us an email at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
Or log into our website, musicalinnertube.com, and click on the microphone in the lower right-hand corner to leave us a voicemail.
And while you're on our website, take a few minutes to listen to past episodes of the podcast, along with pictures and biographies of our guests, blog posts, and lots more.
Our thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for providing us with our theme music.